Yes, I am an artist, and yes, I am an artist advocate. And those two pieces are important components. I am about positive imaging. It is at the core of everything that I do. My work is really about my people. It's about me attempting to capture the positive nuances and subtleties of day-to-day life in the African American community, because you can't find that in movies, even in the 21st century, TV, even in the 21st century, music, even in the 21st century. Who am I? What is my artwork about? I'm often asked that question, and I guess the easiest way for me to articulate that is that I feel like I'm the two parts. Yes, I'm a visual artist, but I am also an artist advocate. I think that those two parts of me are equal, and I also think those two parts of me govern how I approach doing my work. As a child, when creating my artwork, I copied off of comic books, Marvel, DC.
No worries, no worries. Welcome to Urban Land Podcast. I'm Steve Gregory. It's been a minute since I've done my live simulcast here on WLVS, and I got DZ behind the boards. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you bringing us in. I'm blessed today for several reasons. One, is good to be alive, of course.
Amen.
Amen to that, right? And discussing something that I love dearly, and that is art. And I have one of the best to ever do it with me today. So that's very exciting. I want to thank, again, Listen Vision and Jeremy, DJ Boom, for making this possible. It's been a great year here. And again, I'm blessed. But let me, without further ado, I want to just say a little bit about this gentleman here. His work is just absolutely stunning. It is world known. He is from Baltimore. Be more. Yeah, so he's a local legend as well as a worldwide legend. And I want to, right now, before we start, please, for those of you that can multitask and you are listening to the podcast or watching it live simulcast, go to his website now so you don't have to think that I'm bluffing. theartofponcho.com. theartofponcho.com. Go to his website now so you can multitask and look at all of his art, although we will show some later. But take a look at it now so you see that I'm not just selling wolf tickets. This man is great. For starters, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. I want to say, one, that your story is that of, it's a common theme as far as people wanting to produce positive images. And I got some of that from the video we just heard. Like, you talk a lot about positive images. My first question for you would be, can you, as far as creating something positive, can you do that from negative imagery? Does that make sense? Because you talked about feeling happy. And my question for you was, because I do notice your work is definitely pretty much historical. Like, I consider you a history teller. But I wanted to know can you teach by painful images?
Yeah, I think you can. I think I try to do both. In the marketplace, of course, you are primed to produce images that people want to hang on the wall.
Right.
But every now and then I get challenged with subjects that I have to try to figure a way to make somebody want to hang it on the wall. Subject of slavery, for instance. When you think about that word, you don't think about something positive on the
wall.
Right, right.
But I found a way to do something that deals with slavery in my series called the Forgotten Journey series, where I have an African-American male with a slave ship tattooed on the back of his back. And so that took a lot of thought to figure out how to show that story. And believe me, I had 3 other sketches where I had one with a pregnant woman, a naked pregnant woman with this slave ship going down her stomach, which at the time I released this in 1990, early 1990s, it was, people really weren't ready for nudity in a lot of the work that's out today. So I chose to show the guy from the back. So yeah, a lot of times I have to try to find images that will provoke some thought.
Would that be the same series that the Emmett Till piece came from?
No,
Different series?
The Emmett Till series is I have a series of collage pieces that are black and white that use newspaper, and it's usually rendered in some kind of a black and white medium, whether it be charcoal, whether it be acrylic, whether it be watercolor. But those are my more thought-provoking pieces. Those I'm not so concerned about whether people hang them on the wall,
Okay.
as because they tell a powerful story.
And I don't mean to minimize the feeling of you wanting to make people happy, because that's important and it's critical. And you talk about the lack of that in the black community as far as black positive images. So I know that's very important. That leads me to my second question. Are you more vessel or are you more message?
No, I'm a vessel. I'm
You're
a
a
vessel.
vessel.
I don't take credit for half the things I do. I mean, my abilities came because the Creator wanted me to have them. And I've learned very early just to get out of the way and do the work that He wants me to do. And so, yeah, I'm a vessel. I see things from my viewpoint. It may not be like what other people see, but it still can open a dialogue on a lot of different subjects.
Now, taking you away from art for a minute, taking you off the wall, as I say here on Urban Land Podcast.
Uh-oh.
Yes, off the wall. By the way, again, you are tuned in to Urban Land Podcast. I'm Steve Gregory. Joining me is Larry Pancho Brown, the artist who is, I'd say one of the best to ever do it. You talk a lot about your father's, you see in your work, and I venture to say in your life, you see your father's DNA.
Yes.
Let's talk about that DNA for a minute. Tell me about your father.
Well, what I will say is that, relationships go through changes. And at the time, my father was a teenage parent. He had me when he was 16, 17 years old. So I tried to imitate what he was doing. But my dad was very competitive at that stage of his life. And really, I think psychologically didn't want me to be an artist because he had no outlet. And he was very frustrated with what he was able to do. And so, back in the 60s, parents didn't have a whole lot of time to explain to you what things were. So my dad attempted to trick me out of doing it, which didn't work for the most part. But I grew up looking at him struggling because he was self-taught to do certain things and reaching out to his artist community of artists that he knew in Baltimore City. Some of them were big names. Like Thomas Stockett is one of the biggest names in Baltimore. He used to do illustrations for the Afro newspaper for years, and my dad worked there also as a line tap operator. So his background was in commercial art at Carver Vocational Technical High School, where I also attended. But when he had me, he made a transition from commercial art into printing, and that would later come back to benefit me and my business as
Absolutely.
well. So, but my dad's way of working is still kind of in my DNA. It shows up in my work.
Give me an example.
Well, I think for a long time I was anti-dad too. It's like, okay, he ain't want to support me, so I'm just going to do my own thing, and disassociating myself from him. And then later on, I started realizing, wow, you can't do that. You got notoriety, people know who you are, and you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for his work. So once I started viewing it differently, I think our whole relationship blossomed. And my dad, when he passed in 2011, he was my biggest cheerleader. I had convinced him after 28 years of not doing art to get back in and try to travel with me on the road, which he quickly realized, this is not a game. I can't do this.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. But bless his soul, he's with me in my work. And you cannot deny the DNA factor of where it comes from.
Right. And I hear that technically, I hear that discipline-wise. Talk to me about the creative DNA. How do you see it in your creativity?
Well, I mean, I don't overthink things, number one. Some things are just natural, okay? I don't try to get in my head about what I'm doing, because once you get in your head, you can get stuck. I try to put myself in a blank state of being to create my work, and I just let it do what it's supposed to do. I don't come up with any rules, regulations, when it's supposed to be done, what's level of completion. I just work. And I think the problem I see now with a lot of artists is they're not willing to go through that natural process. They have all these preconceived notions of where they should be, how they should be, that it affects the creative process. The creative process is very organic.
There's my daughter plays volleyball, and she was just at a camp, and the coach said, I want you to just move, don't think. He was saying, just move. Thinking is going to stop you from moving.
Exactly. And I was in martial arts. I was in sports. So that notion of thinking too much can stop your how you attack most things.
Absolutely. Theartofponcho.com is the website. Theartofponcho.com. Again, multitask. Check his workout online right now. Yoko Ono just tweeted yesterday. She said, only photographers can make time stand still. As an artist, how do you feel about that statement?
It's pertinent to a photographer. That's what they do. They're at a particular place at a particular moment, and they capture that moment. But artists are time travelers. They basically can sit down. Oh yeah, they can sit down with a piece of paper and grab an instrument, and as soon as that instrument touches the paper, they actually are gone until they come back up. And if it could be 12 hours later, it could be 24 hours later, it wouldn't matter. And that's why it's very therapeutic, because artists stop thinking that moment that they transfer. It's just no place for you to do all of those things at one time. And that's why you see art therapy being such a prominent thing to help people with so many different walks of issues, mental health issues and developmental issues, because that's, in essence, that's what it is, a very spiritual connection.
If Larry Pancho Brown could stop time, when would it be?
Wow, that's a heavy question, man. I would stop time. There's a lot of eras in time I would like to have visited, but probably wouldn't want to stay. Like I would like to go to the Harlem Renaissance, but I wouldn't want to be in a Harlem Renaissance situation. Right. You know what I'm saying? I want to blink back like I Dream of Genie and come back when it get heavy.
Right. That's fair. That's fair. No one said you had to live there for eternity, but if you could just stop.
I would like to blink back and be able to go and see the pyramids and the artists actually doing that work on the pyramids. But as soon as that whip came down to lash my behind for moving a stone, I would be out of there.
That's true. I mean, in the inception of blues.
That's right.
Be a good time to be around the inception of blues.
Exactly.
But you don't want to live in that
I don't
era.
think you want to stay too long.
No, you do not. No, you do not. Again, this is the Urban Land Podcast. My guest is Larry Pancho Brown. I want to ask you quickly, keeping you off the wall. Let's talk about
Are we still off the wall?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
I thought you was gonna go deeper off the wall than that, though. That's not. You ain't came off the wall yet.
Oh, give me a chance. You just wait. Don't test me. Now, your children.
Yes.
You talk about your son a lot.
Yes.
And as far as him, just going through life and living, and you're very proud of him.
Yes.
Is he an artist?
Yes, he is. His mother was an artist. We went to Maryland Institute together. And so he was a studio baby. He came up in the studio while most kids were playing with toys. My son was trying not to cut his head off with a razor blade because they were on my studio floor. So he was raised in that environment. And so through that, he can paint, he can draw. It's not his first line. He likes to act. He likes to do his music. He does rap. He also directs movies and films. He went to Stevenson University to study film. So it's wonderful at this stage of my career to be able to partner with him with certain things with the media aspect of my business at this point.
Now, did you take your father's footsteps and not really encourage him to be an artist because of the struggles, because of, like you said, being on the road life?
See, now you're off the wall, for real. That's a good question.
Or did you?
It's a very good question.
Put a palette in his hand.
No. My father never forced me, and I never wanted to feel like I was forcing my son or making him live vicariously through me. And sometimes I wish I had, because he has raw talents that had I nudged him a little bit, like we were nudged in the 60s and 70s, I think he would be in a better place. But at the end of the day, we didn't know who we were when we were coming through. And now kids now come here with the expectations of knowing who they are. So I'm glad I took the road that I did with parenting him. And he has his own lane. Absolutely. And I think everybody needs to have their own lane. Absolutely.
I'm interested in the relationship between your father and your son. How was that?
Well, they had a great relationship while he was living. But my dad was an athlete. We both coached wrestling for a period of time in high school level. And my son just, I had him late. So he was 2 generations away from me. I'm still a baby boomer. I'm the same generation as my dad was, because he was a teenage parent. So trying to raise my son was a whole different ball game than the way I was raised. So you add that to the level of creativity that him and some of his other counterparts have, it's a totally different world.
do you personally create better from a position of pain or position of pleasure, happiness?
It's the same.
Same for you.
Yeah. Pain and pleasure is the same for me. I think that it shows up in my work different ways. So you wouldn't know. Some of my pieces have a lot of pain in it. You wouldn't know that's what it was intended for. But that's the thing about art. It's subjective. People can look at it and see certain things. And every now and then somebody will look up and they'll go, I see a lot of pain in that piece. So it's a spiritual connection too. Absolutely. I don't try to do all those things. Some people think artists is so deep and we're just so into every aspect of how it's perceived and created and expo. It's very organic, and I love that fact because it just leaves you some leeway to experiment with how to open the dialogue on so many different things.
Okay. As far as social commentary, and you mentioned you're more of a vessel. Comment on the climate of today. I mean, we are in Washington, D.C. It would be remiss if I just ignore our president. So just to get some kind of perspective on what's going on from an artist's perspective here in the nation's capital, how do you think Donald Trump is affecting creativity on a national level?
Man, let me tell you this. I don't know if you can bleep this out, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just teasing.
We don't have to bleep out.
He does not play a factor into anything that I'm doing.
Okay.
We have control over a lot of things. What I will tell you is that the country right now is in a particular morale. And there are a lot of people now caught up in that morale, so they're scared, they're angry, they're frustrated. And there's a lot of distractionary stuff going on right now. But this is the best time to initiate any idea you have. Because while all these folks are in groups being distracted, there are these open lanes to do whatever the hell you want to do. And so thank you for doing that because it allows me to do other things.
Amen.
But no, he has nothing. He won't show up in my artwork. It won't be a piece out there that I was a feeling of how I had a 45. It won't. He just doesn't register in my life.
I want to, before we go to break, I want to talk about an issue that I often visit. And it's relevant because race is such a hot topic in our culture right now, especially with all the young
topic. It's a condition, brother.
Hey, listen, it's essentially what we've been dealing with.
Exactly,
forever.
It comes with this
America.
country.
It is America. Amen.
It's the history. It's this country.
Right. Just flat out, can white artists create black art?
Yes, I've seen them do it. Because black art is defined by the subject matter, not by the artist. When I started in this business in the mid-'80s, the genre of black art was kind of birthed around that period of time, especially commercially. And so you had to be in a category. And so that was the category I was thrust in. I saw artists like Hulis Maverick, who did a picture of Malcolm X that became very, very popular. It was on Rock's show. It was on a couple other shows. Folks didn't know it was him. I know an artist named Meryl J. who did nothing but black subjects, and she did them well. And so I have a lot of white artist friends that do black art. I've always wondered why you got all the things you can paint. But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, artists are excited and tempted by so many different
Mr. Brown, that was the funniest thing I think I've ever heard. I think that was one of the funniest things.
Well, I mean, if we really want to talk about a race, this thing can get deep because I got white friends that act like we do.
Right.
I got white friends, black friends that's dating white friends that make you wonder why would they. So it's just this deep thing. And so as an artist, you want to capture some of that, and then sometimes like, you know what? Let me focus on what I do.
Mm-hmm. I will say that, and speaking as a non-artist, that I think that there's enough images. I think when you stress positive black images, it's why I got into radio. It's something I felt very strongly about as far as the lack of representation of us being positive and being articulate and being able to handle our business. But I think that it's enough of white art out there. It's enough images of positive white Americans. Just from television.
What I will say is that while I in the opening video, I used a term that I was interested in producing pieces that are positive images of African American people. African American artists or artists that do African American life are attempting to do the same thing. I don't think that what I'm doing is any different than anybody else, but I do know that we are longing for positive imagery because of how we're represented on TV, movie, music, and all the other things. So there's never too many positive images that are out there. And so when we look at the amount of African-American themed work that's out there versus all the art that's being produced in the world, it's still a minority and there's still room for it. I'm not doing anything new. I have a central focus. I could be painting flowers, y'all wouldn't know. I could paint white people, y'all wouldn't know. But that's not my focus.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever?
Yes, I was.
Painted flowers.
A lot of people don't know that I did white people holding flowers. No, I'm just joking. I used to do science fiction artwork that had white heroines fighting animals because I studied. I learned how to paint by looking at Boris Vallejo's books. I learned how to paint by looking at Frank Frazetta's books. A lot of people think I went to Maryland Institute to study art. I went to Maryland Institute to study graphic design and photography. So actually, I was a closet artist. A lot of people didn't even know I was painting. Mm-hmm. I got to that point where it was just such a diary-esque kind of a life. While kids were outside playing, I was in my room creating all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it took me a while to come out the closet. Watch yourself. With my art, because a lot of artists go through that struggle of when do I, should I?
Mm-hmm. And we're definitely going to get into that more after the break. But I wanted to keep you off the wall for one more question, and that is about music.
We still off the wall?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Sir. About music.
Yes, sir.
I kind of feel this theme. First of all, your latest pieces both have musicians that you sent me. One was of a saxophone player. One was, I believe, of a guitarist.
Yes.
I noticed the music underneath your video. And just by hearing you talk, I feel like music is something that's also running deep in your veins.
Yes, it is.
When you are creating, what do you listen to?
I'm all over the place. I can't do country. I used to could listen to, and that's my accent, so don't laugh at me. Used to could listen to gospel while I painted. I can't listen to gospel while I paint anymore. And even though I love improvisational jazz, the smooth jazz genre, all my jazz people gonna be sending me all kinds
I'm
of...
sitting here one.
Yeah,
I'm one right here.
But I can paint mindlessly to that.
So you listen
and
to
I
Kenny
like
G.
old R&B.
So
No.
you
I do not listen. I do not listen to Golly G. That's what I call them. But I do have the Rippingtons.
The Rippingtons.
Special effects.
Mm-hmm.
People like that. Norman Brown.
Mm-hmm.
I do listen to that.
Okay.
That gets
David
me.
Sanborn.
If David Sanborn is joined by somebody, maybe.
Okay, on that note, we're going to take a short break. When we get back, we're going to wrap up with the art of Poncho.com. Artist Larry Poncho Brown is in studio. This is Urban Land Podcast, live simulcast on listenvisionlive.com. Again, multitask. Check out his work online immediately. And when we get back, we talk about his art and show some of his art. So I'm excited.
Fantastic. Come on.
Matisse,
Kara Elizabeth Walker.
Jackson Pollock, Gordon Parks.
Urban Lands is a great opportunity for the creatives among us to tell those stories, inspire others, and sell their art.
We're taking the artists off the wall, covering events like Art Basel in Miami, Coachella, London Fashion Week.
Art means expressing yourself. Art means bringing the world closer. Art means creating something that everyone can see beauty in.
Matisse,
Kara Elizabeth Walker.
Jackson Pollock, Gordon Parks.
Urban Lands is a great opportunity for the creatives among us to tell those stories, inspire others, and sell their art.
We're taking the artists off the wall, covering events like Art Basel in Miami, Coachella, London Fashion Week.
Art means expressing yourself. Art means bringing the world closer. Art means creating something that everyone can see beauty in.
Swerving through lanes, ducking from the troll. City of the heat, but I can make it snow. Gotta love it, it's the life I live. If you do it, then you gotta do it big.
course, I watched the same black and white TV shows as everybody else did. But it was apparent to me at an early age that something was missing. I would do black comic book characters. All of my comic book characters that I liked were African American. It seemed that everything I liked that was in the media was absent of African American people. And I'm talking, I was born in the 60s. And to be of that awareness at that young age, I think manifested itself in my work later on. But as I got older and as especially when I attended Micah, I think that something struck me. And that was that I could affect change by creating positive images and creating the images that I saw lacking in my upbringing. So my artwork is about unity. It's about family. It's about struggle. It's about perseverance. If I try to attempt to describe my style, I really don't talk about a style because I'm a multidisciplinary artist. What I will say is that I'm a second generation artist. I watched my father paint. He was self-taught. Another footnote is that I studied graphic design at Micah. I did not study illustration or painting. I was a closet illustrator for most of my life. I went to vocational high school where I learned how to do sign painting. So I won't really talk about that too much, but I had to set that up for me being an artist because I think sometimes the artist has been very discriminatory. I attended Micah as a graphic design major. So when I embarked on becoming a quote-unquote artist or visual artist, people kept trying to put me inside of a box. Well, you're a graphic artist. You're not a fine artist. And so I immediately got faced with the divisions in those two things. So my art really is about my people. It's about trying to capture our culture. It's about trying to encapsulate our culture at a time when we're being practically dropped or misrepresented in everything. And even exploited.
And we're back. This is Urban Lens, the Art Podcast. I'm Steve Gregory, your host. It's been a wonderful first and second season here with Listen Vision, and I'm looking forward to the future. But right now I want to deal with now, and now I have the artist known as Mr. Pancho Brown, who is joining me live in studio. And again, I feel blessed that he's here. I'm thankful to the doctor, of course, for the other artist, Dr. Yemoja Smalls, for getting him here. Got to give her credit for making that happen.
That's right.
Absolutely. We all got this is a village here.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about we're going to take this gentleman onto the wall and
I'm on the wall
and going back and discuss his art
Okay.
because this is why you're here.
Right.
As much as I love to hear you talk and speak, and I think you're more message than you give yourself credit for. Although you're a great vessel, I think you have a great message inside of you, and it shows in your art. So for starters, do you remember the first piece? You talked about being a closet artist.
Yes.
And I heard that in your video when you talked about you went to school for graphic design.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember the first painting that you did that you liked?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I remember the first painting that I did that I got comments from my mother and father. I still own that painting.
That's wonderful. That's just the same thing.
Actually, I inherited that piece when my mother passed. I had a big, huge studio fire in 1995 where I lost my entire studio and everything I had created from that period back. So I still do have that painting in my collection. It's a little naked girl with an afro.
How old were you?
I couldn't have been any more than 7. And I may have drew her from a card or something and just gave her
A Jet
an afro.
magazine?
I don't think so. But I can barely remember. That was like 7 years
And
old.
you still have it?
That
Is
was
it
50
framed?
years ago,
You have
man.
it framed?
Huh?
You have it
No,
framed?
it's in my vault, man. I have a vault, a flat file of all
Yes.
kinds of stuff.
Yes. I would love to see that. I'm sure that's one of the ones you don't want to show too often.
Yeah, that's
but-
off the wall right
Yeah,
there.
exactly. I'd love to see that piece.
Literally.
You may not get that one back. You'd be hunting me down. Okay, so that piece was the first one you noticed that people actually noticed your talent.
Yes, my parents.
Right,
My
your parents. Do you remember the moment you realized, I am not just a graphic artist, I am an artist, and I'm going to go for this? Do you remember that moment?
I remember that moment because I was classically trained as a sign painter. I was one of the first. Well, Carver Vocational Technical High School used to train and have a commercial art program that trained hand letterers and sign writers. And so I went into that program in the 10th grade, and it's a 3-year program. You would learn all the aspects of design and preparation and execution. And in your 12th grade year, you would get work study. Well, I learned it in 3 months rather than 3 years. So I was one of the youngest students ever put on work study at Carver Vocational High School at that time. And so the good thing about that was by going in the trade, they paired me with a gentleman by the name of Jerome Washington, who I credit for my entrepreneurship, because this man had his own business and it was his home. His sign shop was in his garage. And I always had money from the age of 14 up, where most of my friends were running and doing illegal stuff on the streets. I was painting signs. And see, the philosophy at that school was, as long as you got a paintbrush, you'll never start.
Right.
And so I had believed that that's what my future was going to be, until I met this guy who's still very much a prominent second father in my life, named Joe Ford. Joe Ford came to visit me at my home, and he saw all this artwork on the walls. And he was just mesmerized, like, man, why won't you do this work? And I'm like, well, it's something I do for fun. I was like 17, 18 years old. He says, I tell you what, I think I want to find you a illustrative job to see if you can handle it. So I thought he was talking. He came back and gave me my first illustration job, which I never forget, for Morgan Walkathon. And I was supposed to do a poster for this walkathon. And I did this funky tennis shoe with a W shape on the heel, and when it lifted up, you got to see the M. So I did this funky little concept, but he gave me like a couple $100 for it, which represented, I could have did a 4x8 sign or this 17x22 each illustration. So I clearly remember the difference. Right. And then he backed that up by giving me my first full color illustration job.
What was that for?
Bill Cosby was coming to do a benefit at Carver. And I got so good with my illustration work that he wanted me to do a poster for that benefit. And so I got to meet Bill Cosby. The benefit, they gave the posters out of the benefit, and that launched my illustrative career. That was at that point that I realized that the sign painting, I could no longer do that anymore. Because it was time intensive. It was going through all kinds of changes. Artwork. Well, no, I wasn't giving away artwork, man. Sign painting is very lucrative, and it's stuff you don't think about. Well, you're not giving away,
but I guess I'm saying it's originals.
The stuff I'm talking about. No, that's a whole different ballgame. But the sign painting that I used to do, I had a client that was just a parking lot. Just a parking lot. Wow. And I changed the rates, or I would do rate signs.
Wow.
And I was 17, 18 years old, getting $400, $500, $600 for doing signs, man. I was cleaning up. I would go into a Chinese restaurant and go, I can't really read. What's the name of your store? And they would say something. So I could send somebody by tomorrow and fix it. And I'd show up with my lettering brushes in my pocket. So I learned entrepreneurship by being forced down this lane of work study. Changed my life.
Now, you talk about the school, Carver
Vocational Technical High School, yes.
Named after George Washington Carver?
Yes, it is.
That's interesting because when I talk to several artists, I always talk about the finishing component of art, and how I feel like art school does not really emphasize the finishing component enough.
It's not supposed to.
They're not supposed to?
No.
Okay, explain that to me.
When you go to art school, first of all, how can you give credit to it, or how can I give credit to Micah for all the other years of exploration I went through in my work, and my father's years of being self-taught in his work, with that's 4 years. So I've always had that concept in my head anyway. But school has a way of teaching you the basics. Sometimes we don't know the basics. Sometimes you know the basics of color, design, texture, all that kind of stuff. So it served a definite purpose. But I learned all that stuff in high school by the time I got to Micah. The funny thing about Micah is I was a 90 student all through school at Carver. But when I got to Micah, my reading level was behind. And so if I'm going to academics 1/2 of the day and I'm going to you trade half a day, something's got to give. And what it gave was my reading. So they put me in English 101, which was insulting to me because the students that were in the English 101 class were all foreign students. So they were speaking 3-4 languages.
They were ESL
Here I was speaking Ebonics.
You're still ESL. You're still
so I just had to
language.
refocus on reading and getting caught up. It didn't take me long to get caught up, but it was just that experience that changed my life because the white students were terrified of me at Micah, and I was just as probably terrified of them. But the foreign students, man, they pulled me in the club. They took me on the road with them.
Oh, wow.
We went to restaurants together. They exposed me to so many different cultural elements that I would. A city, Baltimore boy,
Right.
They had a lot of fun with.
Right.
They had a lot of fun with me.
Right. I as far as your art and its impact in Baltimore, people they rave about you in Baltimore. And
That's not actually true.
oh yes, it is homegrown.
Let me tell you, brother.
Well, I'll say this:
appearances are appearances. What I can tell you is that it's always a stigma not to support artists that are in your community. So for years, Baltimore never supported me. Baltimore didn't even know what I was doing. I was doing so much traveling. Most of the notoriety I got was from my travels throughout the United States and abroad. They are able to appreciate me more now that the notoriety part happened, but that didn't happen while I was living, because I'm born and raised in Baltimore
Right,
City,
right.
you know?
And that actually leads me to my next question.
Yes.
Is the community involvement piece as far as your art. You talk about mentoring and you talk about helping young artists. Is that still going on, and is it effective?
It's going on by leaps and bounds, and it's the thing that most artists don't know about other artists, or what most people don't know about the lives of other artists. Artists are teachers by nature, most of them. We're taught that they're all loners and they don't do this, they don't share that. It's not true. Most of the artists I know share. They do. I did a community event yesterday. Nobody would think that Larry Poncho Brown goes to a community festival and sets up an 8-foot table and puts his wares on the table. I did that just yesterday, okay? So no, artists are natural educators. When I went to Carver, my teacher was 6'7". So
Wow.
he drilled in me early. When you graduate out of here, I don't care if it's your first year at Micah, you have to come back and speak to the kids. And so we were taught to come back, share information. The whole mentoring piece has been so crucial in my development. And I've worked with thousands and thousands of students, and I've worked with equally hundreds and hundreds of artists over the years. That's just a part of who I am. It's part of my artist advocacy to share information. And I'm always looking for other artists that's in a particular stage of their career to help them migrate through what to do. Because now we got a generational shift of new artists coming in. They have no clue how the business is run.
Your art, as an artist, I see, and you talk about giving. What do you receive from art?
You know, what I receive from art is that it's kept me out of jail and from killing about maybe 50 people. Because it's so therapeutic for me. You know, I know this sounds violent, right? The mind of Larry Poncho Brown. Are we still on or off the wall? I forgot.
Are you strapped?
But I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying, is that art does that for me. It calms me. It helps me.
Right.
And that's all art does for most artists anyway. Most artists are given this ability because they need another way to process their thoughts, another way to communicate their ideas, and they need therapy.
Right.
That's the baseline of what creativity is anyway. Now, when you start talking about selling it, it's another whole animal. Let's make sure those of you that have this ability are at least using it and getting your therapy first. And if you want to have a discussion about how to sell it, come talk to me after that. Right. Because I think artists get it twisted nowadays. They have this ability. Other people see the ability. They are confused about the ability as anybody else. They don't know what they're supposed to do with it, why they got it, all those things. So being an artist, I have really learned a lot by mentoring so many artists to understand how we think and how we react to certain things. And I think that's been a skill set that's really helped me with communicating with artists.
The Art of Poncho Brown, the Art of Poncho.com is the website. Again, The Art of Poncho. Multitask, log on right now. Check it out while you're still here live. I wanted to move forward and talk about currently an exhibit you're working on or a series you're working on, and where can people catch it?
Currently, if you're in the DMV, you can go to Baltimore City Hall and see 30 of my original pieces that were put up back in June for Black Music Month, but it represents 20 years of musical images I've done for different organizations over the last 20 years or so. And that exhibit will be up through August the 7th.
Okay.
And so if you haven't seen my original work, stop by, bring your ID, go in City Hall. It's a beautiful space. It's in Rotunda, and it's got 2 gallery areas, and I have filled the whole gallery with my work. The mayor did a wonderful job of putting that retrospective of my musical pieces together, and we had a wonderful reception. They had 200 plus people there, and they gave me the mayoral award to got a couple of commendations from the mayor. Great. It was wonderful. So that's the latest project I worked on because I created 10 pieces. Did you install it? No. Shout out to my artist friend Jeffrey Kent. Jeffrey Kent took all the headaches. He picked up the work. He hung the work. He's going to take down the work, I think. But Jeffrey Kent is he's also a hell of an artist. So if you haven't seen his work, look up Jeffrey Kent, and he'll be the person taking the show down for me in August. So hopefully you get there to see that before that show comes down.
Absolutely. And where is it? Baltimore City.
Baltimore City Hall.
Baltimore City Hall.
It's at the Baltimore City Hall Courtyard Galleries.
If there's another place in the world besides Baltimore, and you can even include Baltimore, where do you feel most creative?
Wow.
Where do you go? Like a couple friends of mine go to Italy.
No.
Some people go to France.
Okay.
Where do you?
I got you.
Okay.
I've traveled the world with my art, so there are a lot of places I've been outside of the country that stimulate me, but the places I go to get stimulated the most are my artist circle of friends. So I love to visit Paul Goodnight. I love to visit my boy Charles Bibbs. I'll be with him in another week. I go there to get stimulated because
where's Charles Bibbs?
Charles Bibbs lives in California. He's in Riverside, California.
Riverside.
And Paul Goodnight lives in Boston. So I will likely do that first before I go to Paris to the Louvre. Mm-hmm. I would take that. I did that maybe about 7 years ago. And I spent a whole week in Paris just looking at art. I mean, I'm talking about I intentionally went to overdose if I possibly could on art. And it was literally impossible. That's how much art was there. Mm-hmm. So, no, I get stimulated by going in other artist studios and seeing how they work, no matter how big or how small. You know, I went to one of my friends, and he has one room with stuff piled up everywhere, and that's where he creates. I get energy from places like that.
Do you have white collectors?
Yes, I do. And I can count them all on my fingers and toes. No, I'm just joking. I would say 5% of my business is Caucasians. But I can honestly say to you that it wasn't designed with them in mind. If they want to take it home, I have no objection to that. But I know who my market is, and I tend to my market.
DZ, can you show more of his artwork, please? And for those listening, again, I'm going to encourage you to go to theartofponcho.com. I want to talk about that for a second. Mm-hmm. Your work, the images of, obviously, you consider black art, meaning the images are black, of African Americans or of Africans.
You know, I don't really use that term, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a subject, it's a genre, but I don't classify myself in that way.
That's what I want to talk about, the classification.
Yes.
Period, because that can be a hindrance in some circles, and obviously it can be a benefit in some circles. But my question is, how do you feel about being categorized? Because obviously they're going to look at you and categorize you, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's black art. If they have an urban art section, they're going to try and put you in an urban art section. How do you combat that, and do you feel like it's necessary to combat, or do you just live in your own lane and make it happen?
You can't escape categorizing. It's the human nature to do that. So yeah, I could get out and try to boycott being put in one environment or another environment. No, if that's the environment you want to put me in, if that's what the subject matter of my work is, fine. You know, just don't box me in and think that's what you expect from me. But I can't argue that point. I argue that point with my artwork because I have artwork that does all kinds of stuff that may not be necessarily black art themed or black or African American themed. Artists shouldn't be categorized by the brushstrokes that they make. They should be categorized by the art that they produce.
100%. Now, again, moving to the future, when history is telling a story about Larry Poncho Brown, and I heard you talking in the video about your collection, and you've talked about your private collection.
Yes.
And you've even briefly schooled me on purchasing when I was making a purchase of some of your art, and like if you want something that's going to have an impact, that's going to mean something, get this. So you obviously care about legacy, and you know about the value of art and what it means throughout history. And unfortunately, most artists are not appreciated until they've passed away. Meaning,
no, that's not true. They're not being appreciated after they're gone. I can give you the top 10 black artists: Elizabeth Catlett, Jacob Lawrence, all of them. If you look at what their works are now garnering, Roman Bearden is being ripped. They do not. His work should be up with his counterparts. You can still find works of his works that are affordable and still being marketed through Swan Gallery, which is the low-end auction house that deals with African-American art. And so we're a long ways off. No matter how you glorify what's happening with African-American artists, we're still behind our counterparts when it comes to valuation. Of course, now you have some people now that are crossing that line throughout history. But keep looking, because the changes is happening. We got a lot of stuff happening that's positive. I mean, we got Amy Sherrill in Baltimore, just got the presidential portrait. You got Kehinde Wiley, who's been kicking behind the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
Art has turned on the fine art side. But see, what we didn't get a chance to talk about is that there is a fine art side of the business and there's a commercial side of the business. True. And I have flourished in the commercial side of the business. And so the rules and regulations that come with that side of the business, I adhere to. So I'm not so concerned about whether a museum is going to house my work, because my market trajectory is a little different than that. So that's another whole show.
Yes,
that's a show by itself, just describing to the public what the difference between those two markets is, because even artists today have it confused. You got young artists now aspiring to be at a museum, and they don't know that until they learn the art business, they will never get there. They have no idea of the art business itself. They're just organically creating work and unifying with each other and fellowshipping with being artists, but they don't understand the art business. And that's the one thing I've taken time to learn from the earliest point that I can remember, is I wanted to learn what the art business was so I could decide what lanes would work with me and what lanes wouldn't. And so I advise all artists today to put your brush down, stop worrying about sales, and start looking at what trajectory you want to follow with your work.
Okay. Quickly, what will history say about Larry Pancho Brown?
Let history decide that. Pancho's not concerned about what history is going to say. As far as I have given my life to this, I've devoted my life to creating this work. I'm blessed to have a hell of a following for my work. I am in literally 500,000 homes at this stage of my career. And if I died tomorrow, I would be satisfied with the reach I was able to get, because some artists will struggle to reach that point. So let them write it. I'm not very interested in what that's going to be.
Drop the mic. TheArtOfPancho.com. This is Urban Land Podcast. I'm Steve Gregory. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Season 2 will continue. Again, check out Larry Pancho Brown. TheArtOfPancho.com. See you next time.
Means story, life story, and bringing people together. It's a connector. It's your pain. It's your agony. It's what your perspective in the world is.
Art can be beautiful and art can be ugly.
Beautifully ugly.
This is Urban Lens. Urban Lens.